It's all about you. It's all about you, baby. This podcast is sponsored and supported by 365daysofbreastcancer.com. I love this podcast with Jody Raynsford so much. Taking on mental health matters such a lot to me, and it's always fascinating chatting to Jody. He's got a very creative and sparky brain. He started to take on big marathons and ultra runs some years ago, and it's great to listen to what it's given to him. It came to me quite quickly while chatting to him that there's a lot of growing to be done while enduring a long-term relationship with anything. Some of the endurance doesn't serve you long term, but all of it will definitely make you stronger and teach you plenty. I was particularly interested also to hear his view on mental health, and in actual fact see that whether it's a race or an illness, a divorce or grieving, keeping hold of your mental clarity and finding your mental resilience as soon as possible is what will bring you through a tough time. So here you go. Will Jody inspire you to take up running or some other form of exercise that might challenge you maybe? I'm absolutely itching for my arms to get better from treatment because I'm off paddleboarding, so don't laugh too much at that thought. But let me know what you're up to. And welcome Jody Raynsford to It's All About You, the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Deborah.
It's a pleasure. So, Jody, you do a lot of running and crazy things in my mind that I wouldn't find myself doing, but you do such an amazing amount. And I wanted to come at our chat today from the perspective of taking exercise in whatever form is great for you. And I'm really keen to explore the relationship, first of all, that you have personally with running, because it's wide and varied from my perspective when I listen and watching on what you do.
Right, okay, so it is a varied relationship with running. I would suggest, like most runners, it's love-hate. Sometimes you find it incredibly inspirational, you love being out there, you love doing it. Other times you feel less inspired by it. There's been many a time I've been doing a long run and I've had a tantrum, which is
what does that consist of?
So if you do any kind of like ultra running, you have these ridiculous training programs where you have to do things like back to back days of 20 to 30 miles if you're training for a really, really big race. And so just on some of those occasions you find yourselves just wondering what, because fatigue kicks in, you're hungry, the British weather kicks in.
It's like any long relationship.
It's like a long relationship.
Yeah.
And you sort of find yourself stood at the top of a hill, sort of stamping your feet and wondering what the purpose of it all is. But fundamentally, it's one of those relationships that if you give a lot to it, it can give a lot back.
Okay.
Especially, yeah. And so yeah, I think most runners would suggest that they have a love-hate relationship with the sport.
Well, I think at the level you do it at, which is insane in my eyes. But just touch on a few of the things that you've taken on.
Okay, so I started off basically when I first started running marathons was 2006. And so I was deeply ensconced in a journalism career in entertainment. And for some reason, I don't know what it is about, like whether your body tells you something or your mind tells you something or something like that. But I just all of a sudden felt an urge to go running at that point. And I never was a runner before or anything else like that. But I decided I wanted to, I don't know, there's something about running that gives you a certain amount of control. And I wondered whether it was a point in my life where actually I felt like I didn't have control, and so this was a kind of subconscious way of clawing it back.
Yeah.
And other people have said similar things, that like running comes to them at some point. I make it sound very mystical there, but that's only in retrospect. At the time I didn't think so. Whereas
it makes me feel totally out of control when I run. It just really does.
Well, it depends. The thing is, running's changed massively because it's now a mass participation sport. So anyone can do it, and the definition of what you do as a run now has changed. Like the average. Running used to be something that was just for elite people. Like the average marathon time was very, very low. Now the average marathon time is over 4 hours, and so it has become mass participation. But I started 2006 when I ran my first London Marathon, and that was kind of I recall enjoying the training for that, and then I decided to run the London Marathon the year after, and I recall not enjoying that at all. It was in completely different circuits. At the time, it was the hottest. I know we've had a number of hot marathons since, but it was the hottest. And I remember people falling about. And I remember crossing the line crying, and not through exertion, through...
Being a bit delirious.
Being a bit delirious. Yeah. Some old lady come up to me and asked me if I was okay, and I thought I must look really, really bad. And so at that point, I was like, I'm just going to give up. I'm never going to do anything again. And then I don't know what it was. I read a book by a guy called Dr. Mike Stroud. And in it, he talks about a race that he'd done that he thought was one of the hardest races in the world, called the Marathon des Sables. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't known. It wasn't on the radar of anyone back then. And that kind of then deciding to run the Marathon des Sables and the sort of becoming involved in the ultra scene as it was at the moment. There was like this subculture of people running. Races over typical marathon distance that you just didn't know about back then.
No.
People run. I think I ran my first ultra was I'd never run above marathon distance, and I'd never run on more than one day after another. And my first ultra was it was called the Toad Challenge, and it was from Oxford to London along the Thames Path, 90 miles over 3 days, and that was like. It was like blind ignorance and bravado, and there was about 12 of us doing it.
You're going to tell me you didn't train for that, aren't you?
I know.
Because sometimes you don't.
No, well, no. I know. There's my training has changed. I think I've become a little bit lax in my training. For this, I didn't know how to train for it, because there were even though now you can go on Facebook groups and things like that. Even like back in 2010, 2011, there wasn't a huge. I'd never heard about these things. I only heard about them because I signed up for the Marathon des Sables, and other people were talking about doing them, and there were loads of other people who found out, and it was only you used to have to send off paper application forms and stuff in order to get into them, which was really weird, and like 12 people would turn up. So I did this race, and it was an absolute baptism of fire. It was like the worst thing that I'd ever done. But the thing you realised was, like, I got up on the third day, and I had to be lifted up, and I was thinking, there's no way I'm going to run 30 miles. There's absolutely no way I'm going to do it. And then you start moving, you start to shuffle ahead, and you start going, and then you start realising, actually, I can do it. And I think that's the beauty of running ultra marathons and the long distances that I run. So since then I did the Marathon des Sables. I followed that by...
Hold on, what's the beauty?
What? No, the beauty is that is actually realising that the limitation
you think you've got.
Yeah, the limitations that you think you've got, you can push through them,
right.
And people are still doing that today. Thinking that there's no way I can carry on, and actually just realising it. Because when you get to things like an ultra marathon distance, the conditioning in your legs is you need to be able to run them. But after a certain point,
it's about your head. It is
completely about your head.
Yeah,
it's about actually just going on. It's that running a 100-mile race, and you're 5 miles in, knowing you've got 95 miles to go.
Yeah.
How do you cope with that? Yeah. And it's about pushing those boundaries, and you can be very strong and mentally. In a way that allows you to do those. And so the next thing I did, I trained, I did a lot of races before I did the Marathon des Sables. I ran that race, which is really well known now. So that was 150 miles over 6 days in the Sahara. which on the long day when you run 52 miles through the desert and in the dark, and when you're hallucinating. Well, I was hallucinating, and you just think that was the hardest thing I think I'd ever done to that point.
And you came back looking like a mummy, as I remember.
I did. I looked terrible.
Yeah,
I lost. I got infected blisters, infected toenails with infected blisters in it, and I had to have 8 of my 10 toenails removed.
Oh my!
They put the. I don't know if I actually want to go into the detail of this.
Let's
just say there was a lot about. They've not recovered since, and that's
right.
9 years.
Wow.
9 years ago. So I did that. Then I started when I talk to people about running the marathon Derby being life changing. It really was, because I changed. I was an entertainment journalist. Then I became a running and fitness journalist, and so all of my work was then around running, and so it became a big part of it. And there's always that worry when it becomes your work. Do you
still love it?
Do you still love it?
Yeah.
Is it going to be that? But it was great, because it was for Men's Running magazine. The tone of it was really, it was about doing it for fun. It was more about we're doing it. It's more like a travel log, journey type thing. And so I did a bunch of races when I was doing that. Things like the Transalpine, which is a race that I'd always wanted to do, which was at the time I read it as a 5-day race across the Alps. By the time I got to do it, it was an 8-day race. Oh. So that's 200 miles in 8 days from Germany to Austria, Germany to Italy over the Alps. Wow. Absolutely stunning, but just an incredible race where you have to do it as a couple as well, which presents its own challenges.
Not with your wife, I assume.
No, no, exactly.
With a partner.
With a partner, yeah, but you've got to choose your partners carefully.
Yeah.
And then there's other races, and like the Round the Island race and the Isle of Wight, and that's when I thought I really like doing multi-day races, because the whole idea of getting up the next day and running again, getting up the next day, it has its own. So
would you say you've got a real strong mental capacity to take on things that are enduring? I mean, just looking at this podcast and how it was born is because of my cancer journey last year.
Yeah.
But there are people going through all sorts of issues out there. Not just cancer, but grieving and divorces, which can be an interminable amount of time and all of that. Do you think that's given you do you think you had the mental resilience before you started, or have you gained more of it as you've been going on?
I think I've gained it. I've definitely gone beyond the realms of what I thought I was capable of.
Oh, it's insane. It's actually quite incredible.
Yeah, and I don't think I've come near to pushing it. Unfortunately, as you get a little bit older,
you don't think you've come near to pushing
the boundaries of it, really,
of your mental capacity?
No, not really.
Okay.
Simply because I don't think my body's kept up with it. The problem is that when you get a little bit older, you have to work harder to make sure that. And I have the type of job where I'm writing all day that it's the effect of that is started to have an impact on it. So when you're over a laptop,
you need to get a standing up desk.
I have got a stand. I have got
a
stand.
It so much.
It's very different. But I started developing things like hip problems.
Okay.
That
there's a lot of wear and tear, Jody.
Well, it's not. The thing is, the hip problem was nothing to do with the running. The hip problem, I went to physio for it. I had acupuncture and everything, but the hip problem was actually my lats from using the computer.
Oh wow!
And so. What you think it was like a wear and tear injury is actually.
You'd imagine you get a lot of wear and tear doing what you've done.
Well, I don't. Amazingly.
It's amazing.
It's amazing.
Because there was one race I remember you going for. It was just incredible in my eyes that you were even doing it. But I don't think you'd even gone out and done anything. You just went for it.
So there's a thing about running ultras. So with ultras, it's not about the speed.
No.
I mean, you can run. People are running ultras ridiculously quickly.
Yeah.
But it's all about actually making the cut-offs, getting through it, and performing in a strong way. And so you can, if you've got the conditioning and you've got the ability to have the mental fortitude to do it, you can succeed at doing it. And that's it. I think that's what surprises a lot of people. A lot of people think, "Oh, I can't run a marathon," or "I couldn't run 100 miles."
You have to put the training in.
And they could do those things. It's just they've never tried. They've never pushed themselves to a point where they want to, and you have to want to do it as well.
Yeah.
The thing is, when you get when after I started doing those, I then decided to move on to 100 milers, and so I ran the South Downs Way 100, the Thames Path 100 a couple of times, and those are completely different challenges. So trying to do 100 miles in one day, running.
That's a different pressure.
It's a different pressure altogether. It's where you normally realise at about 30 miles that this is a bad idea, and so that's the that's the thing. So it's about overcoming that. It's such a mental battle.
It is, honestly. I'm just listening to you thinking I'm quite strong mentally, but I don't know that I could do that.
I think you could do it. I think it's because there's a running aspect to it that I think people think that it's a physical thing. So and you do need to have a certain amount of conditioning. So you were joking before about not having trained for races, and that's true. I haven't trained for some races. I've turned up literally not having done something. I mean,
you've always done it and done really well. We've always laughed the fact you've done that, but then you've pulled it off as well.
But that's the thing. So like running the Brighton Marathon with 45 minutes notice. So
that was it.
That
was the best one.
So my podcast partner David, he was pacing Brighton Marathon, and we went out the night before, and they were at ZZ or something like that, and I was sat there drinking and having pizza and stuff like that, and they were like, "Oh, you're running tomorrow?" And I'm like, "How?
Yeah.
How am I going to run tomorrow?" And they go, "Oh, if we get you a place, will you come?" And I'm like, "Yeah, whatever." Yeah. And of course, then he phones up about an hour before the race started on the Sunday and said, "I'll get down there, we've got your place." And then that was hard. But it's...
Right, so here goes.
Okay.
Was it hard because you hadn't trained for it, or hard because you had to do a real quick flick mentally to get you in that space?
It was hard while running it because I never think I prepare for races, but I obviously have some kind of... It's become kind of subconscious now as to things that I do.
Yourself.
I know how to rely on myself. So but when you remove that, it becomes a little bit more difficult. So I kind of saw that as a challenge as well, and so that's why I did it. I saw it as a challenge. So I thought, can I really pull this off? And as I was stood at the start line, I was thinking, is this going well? Like 3 miles in, I'm like, this is great. This is going to be a really good story. People are going to love this. I mean, like, this is just such... Because that's the thing, when you're in the journalistic mindset...
You're always
looking for the story. You're looking for the story, something like that.
Yeah.
And then you get like a couple more miles and you're like, this is terrible. This is the worst thing ever. I haven't prepared for this or anything else like that. And it becomes a grind. But it's about adapting with a lot of the time. Like, over 100 miles... It's the ability to constantly adapt. It's to think that you're never going to have a race plan that's going to go as you want it to. You're never going to be in a position where everything's going to go right, because so many things can happen over such a long period of time, and you can have all sorts of problems. So it's about firstly making sure that you've got all the preparation in order to make sure you do that, and you do that things like with support crews, with extra kit, things like that. But also having the ability to not be knocked off by the idea that things have gone wrong.
So if something happens en route, you just have to put it behind you immediately, actually, and move on.
Yeah. And sometimes that's difficult. Sometimes I've had...
But that's just life, isn't it?
That's exactly
It's amazing. I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, this is like talking to me last year, going through cancer, when you're really weighed down and you're really fighting for your mental clarity. You do that in like the space of whatever the duration of your race is. Yeah. You're doing that all the time. But you're choosing to put yourself through it.
That's it. But sometimes, that's really hard to do, because sometimes. So the one thing you're asking me about is in terms of running and mental health. So sometimes, if you take something into that race that you're unhappy with, then you can spend 100 miles getting more and more annoyed about absolutely. Wow. And so you can find yourself in a really dark place.
I can relate to that as well. I can, because I think it was round 2 last year and I went through it on my own, and there was a few things upsetting me and they turned into just the biggest mountains, and then I was looking back on it just yesterday, chatting to a friend about it, and actually it was all okay. I don't know what the big deal was. It was my head that had gone. I'd lost it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And do you think that's what happens?
Oh, absolutely. Because
you lose the plot.
You do lose. It's something tiny. I mean, you can see videos of people. I think there was a video recently of someone on a cycle race losing it because someone gave them the wrong, tyre or something like that. Yeah. Because things like that can build up over that. It just
skews you, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah. And really, what is really not a trigger point turns into a trigger point.
Yeah.
For example, when your support team meet you, you expect them to have everything there, and and they're doing it for you and everything like that. But if they don't get a pair of socks on quick enough or something like that, all of a sudden you can turn into like a complete diva.
Demon, yeah.
And that's it. And you're just like but really it kind of doesn't matter. It's just depending on where you are, where your mental state is. With fatigue, with how you're feeling about yourself, how you're feeling about the race, how you're feeling about what you're doing. That is the thing that almost like pre-frames your experience of those. So you can have exactly the same. So the Thames Path 100, I've done it twice. One time I did it, it was awful. Not because it was difficult or anything else like that. It's just I wasn't in a good mental place when I did it.
So you're taking all that mental anguish for a 100-mile spin.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was awful, and it was the kind of thing that
I can
made
really
me
get that.
Yeah, I mean, as my wife Libby will attest, that for a week after, I can be in a really bad place.
Wow, okay.
And so it's a difficult thing. Then I can run the same race again in a completely different mental
frame
state.
of mind.
Absolutely, and it's just the way I went into the race that matters, which is why things like training and preparation are really important, because you're getting yourself into that space in the right way.
But sometimes in life, if we just kind of look at the two things parallel, you don't have the time to prepare for it.
No.
And you have to deal with what comes at you. A diagnosis of cancer or a divorce or somebody dying, it's an immediate shock and quite a traumatic experience. You don't have any time to prep for it. And so it's the carrying that forward and adapting to the change as quickly as you can makes you come through the other side. And I don't mean to be a success about it, because there's no success in it, but it makes you a bigger person, and you must learn from so much about yourself and all the runs you've done. You really must.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But preparation isn't necessarily like the 6 weeks up to the thing. Preparation comes in. So one of the questions you asked me was about how can you run a race without having done any training?
Yeah.
Well, that's all down to conditioning. So if you've done
physical conditioning previously.
Well, I think there's physical conditioning and mental conditioning as well. That mental conditioning.
So I want to just ask you, when you went into this race, your 100 mile, and you weren't in a good space mentally, are you not able to do something with yourself beforehand? Have you not got mental exercises you can do beforehand to just get rid of that? So I
didn't realise I was in that space when I started.
Okay. That just emerged en route, did it?
It emerged en route,
so you were coaching yourself on the way round,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
But it's one of those things. But I think that's the thing that people can get into. You can get into that spiral, can't you?
Oh,
you can either spiral upwards
of doom.
Yeah.
That's what I call it. And I've been on it several times. Prior to being diagnosed, I think I had 2 years where I was really quite depressed, and I didn't know I was, because I don't do depression.
Yeah.
But I think that's what I was. And it's hard. It's really hard then to claim the space and come back out of it.
Yeah.
You have to work kind of twice as hard as you would do normally, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was. I didn't realise it was there. So it.
Oh wow! Okay.
It kind of was like
it was
like a little therapy session.
Yeah.
A self-therapy session over 100 miles. Yeah,
nice.
Exactly. And everyone else felt the effects of it.
Lovely.
But yeah, it's. I think So there's different types of conditioning. There's that physical conditioning, which is about the training and making sure that you're in the right place. Where if you run a lot of distances, so someone that's run a marathon before kind of has it in their legs, so they can do it again.
It's a bit like being a professional dancer. See?
Absolutely.
I've recently gone back to doing Pilates, and I've not done any. I was really off it last year, obviously, and so I'm stood there and I just hit the spot and everything. My Pilates teacher's like, my God, that's insane! I didn't have to do anything to you, but it's all still in here.
Yeah.
And you forget. I didn't know it was, but it's just natural. So you must find that too.
Yeah. So you do have that. I mean, the thing is, without training, you lose speed, you put on weight. There's all those elements.
Aging process going on.
Yeah,
and
you're not sharp, but you have the conditioning, and so like you have the physical conditioning.
And you know how to rely on yourself, don't you? That's massive, isn't it?
Yeah, and so there's mental conditioning as well, and that's about. It's about being resilient, and it's about understanding how do I cope with things that happen. And the good thing is, I think I can pretty much, if it's not down to speed, I think I can pretty much enter any race and give a good account of myself, because I have that mental resilience. I'm not going to be quick. You know, I need to train
No,
in order to get quick.
You're not doing it to get across the line first, but
no,
you know,
exactly.
You can complete it and achieve it.
Yeah, and I think that's really what's emerged with running, is that there's different groups of people now. There's some people that, you know, are all about, you know, trying to like smash their personal best or trying to win and, you know, go as fast as they can. But then you have this other, you know, this other larger, I would say, group of people who are all about pushing their own mental boundaries and trying to see, you know, how do I cope in these situations? What do I do? Because it's their way of, I don't know, adding control into their life if they feel that they're not in control. You know, it gives people different things in different ways, and so, you know, and that's I think we kind of have to acknowledge that running does different things for different people.
There's so many ways to do it, isn't there? I mean, there's your jogger, which would be me if I was to go out. You know, I don't think I would attempt an ultra. I couldn't even get that straight in my head. Yeah, okay, I'm listening to you. I heard you say it before, and I thought, because but I could I?
The thing is, when I started running ultras, the thing that surprised me was that, so normally if you join a running club, everyone's like skinny, quick, whip it type thing.
Yeah,
you know, they've been there a while. If you like on these ultras, I was amazed at just like the fact it was like 50-50 men and women, which is really unusual for most things. Probably less unusual now, but certainly was 10 years ago. And just different shapes, sizes, ages. Okay. You know, people are going at different things. Some people were walking it, some people were trotting along. Yeah, and so it was. There was a lot more relaxed. I sound like it's like the good old days of ultras or something like that. But there was something about it that meant that people were seeing it for as a personal challenge rather than a race.
Right.
And in some of those, they didn't even have timings. They didn't have cut-offs or anything else like that. So it just showed that people were doing these things just to do it. To
challenge themselves.
Absolutely.
So, of this, did your podcast out, which is Bad Boy Running, and I've been watching this unfold for the last however long, few years, and it's just amazing to see what's gone on. There's people running events for you, and you've got T-shirts going on, and you and your crazy partner, you know, you talk to some amazing people, and how did that emerge?
So this emerged just purely. It wasn't an accident. When Bad Boy Running, Men's Running, when I stopped working for Men's Running, I stopped being a journalist altogether and started as a copywriter. And so I wanted to carry on, and I was friends with. I'd met David when I'd covered the Sierra Leone marathon.
Right.
And I just had like the both worst and best experience there. I stayed in the most awful hotel. People going, oh, well, it is Sierra Leone, but I thought all the hotels were like this. I went into this hotel and it was so awful. I just thought, this is, and then went to David's hotel. It was lovely. It had a swimming pool and stuff. And I'm like, what? Wait, I didn't realise they existed like this, but it was hilarious. And so that's how I knew David, and we kept in touch. And when work at Men's Running finished, we thought, well, there's still a place for a much more relaxed, a much more conversational way of talking about running, because at the time there were podcasts that were all just talk ultra, they're all just talking about running. We thought, well, actually, let's do something a little bit. So we just decided to start recording some episodes to talk about things generally, our favourite races, things like that, see how it went. And we initially started off saying, we don't want to be like other podcasts, we're going to keep it to like 30 minutes max. We're not going to have guests on too much. We're just going to talk about things like that. And so that went out the window pretty quickly. And it actually went, it normally takes a while for a podcast to catch on, but really quickly we started to get listeners. Then we started the Facebook group. And it was once we got the Facebook group that it really took off. Okay. It really took off because then there was more of a community and everything, and so we've purposefully positioned ourselves in a sense that we kind of knew who we were going to, the people that wouldn't normally go to running clubs. Like we had this slogan that goes on the back of the T-shirts that we sell, that the problem with running clubs is it's full of runners, which was a quote which David made, which is the point that the thing is that runners, generally are people that are sort of introverted, keep themselves to themselves, which doesn't make a running club particularly, it doesn't necessarily make it unfriendly, but it doesn't make it friendly,
Sociable.
it doesn't make it welcoming. And,
so,
if you're a certain speed or whatever, you don't normally fit in at a running club. So we're the place where you're going to fit in. And so we just carried on doing the podcast. We've been doing it for 3 years now.
Wow.
Every single week-ish. And it's kind of grown organically, like very, very quickly. There's interaction. We stand for certain things and we stand against certain things, and because we're not beholden to, because we can't get advertising basically. So it's not as if we have to please our sponsors. We're not going to pretend that.
So you're just going to go for
so we could just say whatever we want or do whatever we want.
Yeah.
But what's happened is that it has attracted a lot of people who didn't find their place in necessarily in running clubs, and people who did want to have the kind of conversations that we're having. And even though that we're called Bad Boy Running, we have we have Ali as well, who is a big advocate for like mental health and running, and talks about it very, very openly. And so we have like big conversations that other people don't have, just very naturally, not because we're thinking this will get more listeners or anything else like that, just because it's things
just interesting.
It's just things, and also things that the community suggest as well, and so it becomes circular, and
it's a collaborative
absolutely
effort.
And it's grown into something. So we joke that we call it not a cult, hashtag not a cult, because it's kind of turned into a cult by accident. It's like the accidental cult, because I was asked to do a quick talk on Bad Boy Running, and I come up with typical copywriter, come up with a funny headline first and then try and make it fit. And so I came basically how to start a cult, and then I looked online as to all the characteristics of a cult. And I was thinking, we do. I tell you what, we do.
We're heading that direction.
We're pretty close. I mean, things like you welcome in the outliers, the alienated, the people that don't feel they belong anywhere else. You have certain things that you're against, which is mainly running clubs or cyclists. And people group around that. You allow people to show their allegiance. So we always say that when you finish a race, you have to do press ups, because David was once on a program called Special Forces Hell Week, and he got kicked off it because he couldn't do press ups. So that torments him every time people do it. And then you get them to all identify themselves by selling, by them wearing things. We sell merchandise, a lot of merchandise that. So they can wear them at races and stuff. And it's kind of crazy. Like it's got a life of its own. We're not really in charge of it anymore, and so we do things like and because of that, we then attract better guests. So we've spoken to Laz, who runs Barclay Marathons. The most difficult marathon series in the world, and different types of guests that we never thought we'd speak to. Which attract more and more people, and it kind of it kind of spirals out of control. And now we've become affiliated as a proper running club as well. So we've almost become the thing that we said we'd never become. But we're just waiting to see how long it is before England Athletics kick us out. So.
But you've built a great community there.
I mean, it's insane. Like the amount of feedback we get. Like we get some really amazing messages about people who have never done any running before. There's people listening to us who don't do any running at all. Some people would argue that includes me as well, because at the moment. So, but there are people who are having problems in their lives. They have the things that they need to deal with, and actually just finding another group of people who they can just talk to. That we've got like a really good supportive community, and running and like the podcast has brought them together, but all the other relationships have like spiraled from that, and then we get like some incredible messages from people who've done amazing things, and so it's just we don't take any credit for it. The only thing is we've just spoken to each other for for a couple of hours every Monday for the last 3 years, and it's really just brought people together. But I think it feels as though you're inside someone else's conversation,
absolutely.
and people feel a part of it.
It does,
and it connects each other as well. So,
and I think you need that. There are so many problems and issues, and you never know what's going on in somebody's life, and so to have that community that you belong to, it could be a lifesaver for some people.
Yeah, absolutely. We absolutely recognise that as well, and so we don't take that for granted. And so we do kind of feel like we have a responsibility, but and so we're aware of that now. So we are open to different ways of like helping each other and mentoring each other. It all sounds very, very culty when I start saying it.
Well, to me it just doesn't, because having gone through what I've gone through these last 12 months, that support I couldn't have never got through the year without it.
Yeah.
And so really what you're creating is support for people to jump into something that's mentally good for them, physically good for them. They're creating a social aspect, and a whole community's come together.
Yeah.
And that actually, quite frankly, from where I've just come from, is vital.
Because the thing, and the other important thing is that there's a lot of people who rely on running and physical exercise in order to almost like treat their like mental health issues.
Yeah, to function.
Yeah. And so, but the real issue is that when you get injured, all of a sudden that disappears. If you can get injured, you're injured for months on end. It's ripped from you. And so what happens in that situation? And so the group is kind of acting as a way of like helping people, and there's almost a support network there, and that's the hardest thing. So that's kind of what I, not in the sort of the same depth, but I went through in the sense that I got so injured I couldn't run anymore, and that's when I decided to give up doing ultras and really long races and focus on the shorter distances, which are a challenge in themselves. But even though I was like kind of pleased that I'd give up doing those long distances, it wasn't until I'd given them up that I realised how important they were as a function of my own mental health,
your own well-being.
Absolutely. And so it's not until it's gone do you realise how much. Even though I don't consciously, I never really consciously said, okay, I run for mental health, because I never thought that it did anything like that. I thought in some ways it worsened my mental health depending on the type of races, or I don't know how many tantrums I went through. Exactly, I was taking all sorts of baggage with me, and so I thought actually if I can give it up, this would be great. And then when I gave it up, like my sports therapist, was just because he was the one encouraging me to give it up and actually just do shorter distances, do something a bit more sort of.
Well, now you can take your problems for a shorter trot.
Well, you can't do it on a fast 5K. You're not thinking about anything, so that's the great thing about it. Yeah. But you're not thinking about them for a shorter period of time.
Yeah. So I just want to round up really. And say thank you for coming on my little podcast.
It's a pleasure.
I'm really keen to take people from great to greater, and running seems like a great thing for that. But so many things you've said today are a metaphor for people going through a tough time, dealing with cancer or whatever it is they're going through. It's a long distance situation. It's not a short fix.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you've spoken about in a very different format today, which is really intriguing for me. And I'd just like to finish on with what inspires you and where you're taking your podcast next. That's 2 quick sneaky questions before we finish.
What inspires me? What inspires me is when, specifically, this has happened several times within the community and on the Bad Boy Running community, and it's amazing when it's someone who has never run before or has always wanted to run or done something, and they've gone and we've kind of followed them on their journey, and they've ended up doing it precisely because of all the support that they've had from other people in the community. I mean, that's just incredible. That's because they it wasn't there for them before. We've created something. They've created something out of nothing.
Well, you've just given them the platform.
Yeah, that's it. You just brought something, but they created...
And allowed people to do that. You've allowed it to take its way, and that's a real gift, actually, that you've created there, because lots of people might want to control it, and that's where you stifle everything. But you've allowed everyone to just literally run. Well,
we're not organised enough to control anything,
no,
so...
It's worked to your benefit.
It does, yeah. Let's put it down as something we've nurtured rather than,
Yeah.
But that's I find amazing.
Yeah,
I find really inspiring that people doing things that they wouldn't otherwise do as a result of that. And so one of the things that we're doing next on the podcast is we've got the running club, which adds another dimension to it, and we'll see really what that does. But we've also got things like we're doing the running show in January. We've been invited along to host a whole area called the Ultrazone, and we're bringing across some of the biggest names in the ultra world to talk and have conversations. And so again, it's going to be another one of those things where actually we get everyone together in
Yeah,
place and
nice.
actually meet each other physically.
Yeah,
And
but that's
just,
really satisfying, isn't
it
it?
is really satisfying, but
Yeah.
it's really weird because then loads of people know who you are and you don't know
Of
anyone.
course, yeah.
And if you're like someone like me who can't ever remember anyone's name, you always wonder, is this someone I've met or is this
Yeah.
someone listening to the podcast?
Yeah,
It's really
yeah.
weird. I
You're
don't know.
creating your own celebrity world.
I don't know if it's quite celebrity. I think it's more
Well,
infamy.
it is celebrity in your field. Let's call it
Celebrity in my household.
We might know different. Well, that's brilliant. Thanks a million. I expect I might want to have you back actually because I think we could talk for much longer. But that's really fantastic. Wish you masses of success, continued success with your podcast, and thanks a million.
Thank you.
If you like this podcast, like it, comment on it, or share it. Thank you. It's all about you.